you can illuminate 3D layers with lights. After Effects has 4 different kinds of lights, and in this lesson I'm going to show you all 4 of those lights and explain their properties. In subsequent lessons in this chapter, I'm going to talk about how you animate those properties and work with things called material options and also shadows. So to follow along, go to Working Files and open up After Effects Projects and open up 1901 Lights Intro. So I've got this project set up with one comp, and the comp has 2 layers, a text layer and a texture background, and I've set them up in 3D, and I've got the texture set back pretty far, about 3,000 pixels, and the text right at 0. I've got 2 views here because it's a little easier to see how lights work when you have 2 views. This is the custom view, and this is the active camera view. I've got 4 lights here, and we're going to work with all 4 lights in this lesson. But the first order of business is adding a light to a comp, and how do you do that? Well, a light works the same way as any other layer. You can go up to Layer, New, and Light that way, or just right-click down here inside the timeline and go New Light. When you do that, you get this dialog box, Light Settings. And you can choose from 4 different types of light, parallel, spot, point, and ambient. I'm going to show you each one of those in a moment. And each one has a certain set of properties that you can select here, then you can keyframe down here. So we're going to just bypass this now and take a look at these 4 lights that I've added already. We're going to start off with Ambient. It's the simplest of them. I'll turn Ambient on for a second and watch what happens over here when I turn it on. It just gets a little brighter. So I'll just double click on this to open up its dialog box. And you can see that Ambient has 2 properties, color and intensity. Now we're going to change those, and we're going to watch what happens when we change them because we have preview selected here. A really nice feature here. So I'm going to change the color by clicking on this swatch here. Let's make it a little bit blue, make it kind of cold looking. You can see it immediately changed over there like that. I can make it a little less dark blue like that. Or I can make it warm, for example. Let's go down and make it orange, make it warm like that. You can see the intensity changes depending on how bright or dark the color is like that. So we'll go with that orange, overall orange cast to it, and click OK there. Then we can change the intensity. Now the default intensity is 100%. So how can you go more than 100? Well, you can, and it's helpful sometimes to go to something more than 100 when you really want to brighten things up. But you see that Ambient just makes everything brighter or darker for that matter. It just changes the lighting for everything. It's not at all selective. It just makes everything brighter or darker. Let me just click OK and show you what happens when I turn this thing on and off. This is the default setting. This is how bright things are with no lights added to them. And when you add a light, that overrides whatever the default setting is. So there's Ambient turned on. I'll turn Ambient off now. Let's take a look at Parallel. I'll turn on Parallel so you can see what it looks like. You can see we've got the parallel light right there on this side. If I click on the parallel, you see the light right there. It's 3D. You can move it around as you would in any other 3D object. It has a point of interest out here. It's pointing at that text, and there's a shadow falling back there on this background. Parallel is a light that you probably won't use that often. It's sort of emulating sunlight in that it's straight line lighting. It can go forever, or you can limit how far it goes. Let's open it up and take a look at Parallel. There you go. You see that you've got color again and intensity. This one, along with the other 2 lights that we're going to talk about, has fall off. And fall off is great. It lets you control how quickly the light falls off, how quickly it gets dark or disappears off in the distance. Now, Parallel goes forever if you have none selected. But if you choose smooth or inverse square clamped, then that kind of is a realistic fall off. And you just determine how far the fall off radius is over here. You can just increase this to whatever number you want, and then it will then fall off farther or closer to the light source. You can have cast shadows turned on. We'll do that most of the time. Then you can control the density, how dark the shadow is over here. There's no shadow diffusion with Parallel because it's a parallel light. It's absolutely straight. There shouldn't be anything like a soft edge to a parallel light, so it's not offered there. So those are the various properties for the parallel light. I'll click OK there. I'll turn Parallel on and off so you can see that. There it is. Off with the regular lighting and then on like that. If I turn on Ambient now, you can see that they can work together. But now that they're working together, it tends to be too bright. If I go back to Ambient now and let's say knock down intensity, I can do that, kind of make them work more happily together. But you can still see that the parallel light is throwing the shadow off that text there. I don't have to go back to these dialog boxes to change things. I can open up the settings down here. There's a keyboard shortcut when you're working with things that are in 3D. If you press AA twice, it shows anything that would be a 3D kind of property. And we have intensity and color for Ambient, so I can work on intensity here as well. And also change the color down here as well. And as far as, let's say, Parallel goes, I go AA for Parallel. You see there are more things there because it had more properties. Let's turn off both of those lights and close down Parallel. Let's see what Point looks like. I'll double click on Point. Point is like a light bulb just kind of hanging out there in space someplace. It throws light all around, 360 degrees. Wherever it is, it just throws light everywhere. But it's not like a parallel light in that it shines on something and then the shadows can be larger if this thing is farther away. So you see how that works. There is no fall off selected here, but I can make a fall off. I go smooth or inverse squared. Inverse squared is a more realistic fall off, but again, I can increase the radius so you can see things off in the distance there a little better than we have right now. You can begin to see them coming in like that. Go a little bit farther there so you can see where the fall off goes. We can go back to smooth, slightly different fall off there. We can increase that one too. There you go. We're casting a shadow again, and there's a fall off distance that says kind of like the cone where it falls off a little bit. Change that by bringing that way down. See the cone there? It says, what's the edge of the fall off, basically? What's the region that falls off? And then we have a shadow darkness here, but we also have a diffusion here because this is not a parallel light. So you do want to have some kind of an edge to it that's not too sharp. So you can kind of soften it up a little bit like that. All right, we'll click OK there. We can turn on ambient again and see what that looks when they work together. How about parallel with that one as well? Throws a hard shadow in the midst of the soft shadow, and now things are too bright. But again, I could click ambient and click AA to open up that guy and drop its intensity so it's not so overpowering. So you can have lights work together, and sometimes it's helpful, in fact, to have them work together. All right, we'll turn those three fellows off and close that one down. And we'll go now to spot. Spot is the one that has the most properties and is the most fun to work with. I'll double click on it to show you its properties, its dialog box. There's spot again. You've got color and intensity. You've got a cone angle and a cone feather. Very interesting. You can limit the light like that in a cone, just like a typical spotlight. And a cone feather basically brings the light in from the edge. If there is no feather, I take it to 0 here. It's got a hard edge to it. See that? And if I take the feather a little bit in to another number, you see that it's pulling it in. It's soft around the edges now, but we're also pulling it in like that. So all the way out, that's the full value there. 0, and then we bring it in a bit. It does kind of soften things. There we go. And the angle determines how wide it is. It's always going to stay around, but you can determine how wide the cone's going to be, which is really cool if you want to do something like move this thing across there. Also cast shadows, has the fall off options here as before, and a shadow diffusion there as well. I'll click OK. I'm going to go over here now and grab onto that point of interest. I can move it around like that. Let me change this little view here to off so that we show the actual view here. You can see how sharp it is as we go across. Pretty neat, huh? There we go. We're back like that. And if I turn on ambient now, you can see that we have a little bit of a view. If I go AA for ambient and give it a little bit of brightness, you can see that you can have the spot going and still see some of the background as well as you move the spot around. So those are the 4 lights. I'm going to talk about animating the lights in the next lesson, and we'll talk about the material options and shadows in the lesson after that.